I mean, of course I knew the Beach Boys. Everyone knows the Beach Boys. They did the music for the Sunkist commercials. They showed up on Full House, and with John Stamos on guitar even. And maybe their ubiquity colored my opinion, but at no point growing up do I ever remember attaching any kind of significance to their music. I mean, thanks to Good Vibrations, I knew what a theremin was, but mostly what I heard, the Beach Boys, what I heard was a kind of sugary and nondescript kind of pop music. Or sometimes it was just downright annoying, looking at you, Kokomo. But then I started seeing Pet Sounds on everyone's list of the top albums of all time. Really? The Beach Boys? I mean, like Little Deuce Coupe, Surfin' USA, Help Me Rhonda, that Beach Boys? It was like finding a barbershop quartet in the pages of Rolling Stone. I mean, when Pat Boone covered Little Richard, at least the source material was solid. But the Beach Boys? Sure, they got the whole big vocal harmonies thing down, but nobody's putting the Four Freshmen or the Chad Mitchell Trio in the same category as Are You Experienced or Exile on Main Street. I didn't get it. Then I started talking to people, reading up, doing research, and things started to get even more confusing for me. I mean, according to Paul McCartney, Pet Sounds was a major influence on the making of Sgt. Pepper's. Brian Wilson is considered one of the great songwriters and arrangers in rock history. And more than one source I read cited Pet Sounds, and not Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, as the true origin of progressive rock. Given all of this, there was only a couple of conclusions I could come to. Either this actually is a great album, radically different from the Beach Boys that I had heard so far, or else my ideas about music are way different from what most people's were. Nothing for it. Time to find out. The first things I noticed. Well, most of the songs were slower. Lots of ballads, mid-tempo things. Heard plenty of odd instruments, like a bicycle horn and a bass harmonica. I like a bass harmonica. It's a cool sound. The songs were all short, too, most of them under 3 minutes. From the sound, I could definitely tell that this was one of those albums where the Wrecking Crew was doing most of the heavy lifting. There was nothing on any of the tunes you could call flashy or technical. Nobody took a solo, just ornately produced little songs. The overall arc of the album was similar to Revolver in terms of how the songs were ordered. Most of the songs had a structure that wasn't necessarily traditional, but not all that hard to follow either. Some of the melodies were catchy and clever, and others were just weird. During those first few spins, it was Sloop John B. that stuck in my brain. It was kind of like a sea shanty, but with all the pirate taking out of it. So like if the Beach Boys recorded the sea shanty. It's just a 16 bar, 1, 2, 4, 5, repeated a few times. Not sure what it says about me that during those first few spins, I landed on an old Bahamian folk song, but there you go. And maybe the point of it really was to make the next song, God Only Knows, a lot more interesting, which it certainly is. It's a really beautiful little song. Still wasn't seeing all the fuss was about, though, so time to dig deeper. After repeated listens, I have to admit that musically, there's an awful lot of cleverness here. Even though the songs are teeny, and even though none of them are particularly dense in terms of harmonic content, they still manage to work in a few repeated motifs, mostly involving 4-to-1 walkdowns. There's also a lot to be said about Pet Sounds being one of the earliest examples of using the studio as an instrument. Sure, there's a Phil Spector wall of sound thing going on, but beyond that, most of the songs are great examples of ensembles that could not exist in reality, both in terms of the space the instruments occupy, as well as the dynamic levels of each. And while usually I prefer instrumental music, I have to say, though, that the two instrumental songs are probably the two weakest songs on this album to me. Neither have a particularly strong melody, and the most interesting thing about them is the instrumentation. Most times, personally, when I listen to music, I don't even pay attention to a song's lyrics. There are albums I absolutely love that I've heard dozens of times, but I have no clue what the lyrics are. I mean, the lyrics aren't why I'm listening. But ironically, that does bring me to the single biggest hurdle that I have to enjoying Pet Sounds, and that's the lyrics. I mean, look, I recognize that times are different, but the overall impression I get from most of these songs is one of, well, a nice guy. And I mean that in the cringiest sense of the term, nice guy. I get the overwhelming sense that if this album were released today, the phrase friend zone would appear in there at least once. Right out of the gate, wouldn't it be nice? It's about a guy who can't sleep with his girlfriend until they're married. So at first I'm thinking maybe this is just like aimed at 14-year-olds and they're kind of projecting themselves into some sort of future. But also in the lyrics, he says, in the kind of world where we belong. And that just seems creepy to me. That's how I come away with from most of these. Just creepy. I mean, I could try to be big in the eyes of the world. What matters to me is what I could be to just one girl. I'm waiting for the day when you can love again. I'm the guy she left before you found her. I'm not saying you won't have a good love with her, but I keep on remembering things like they were. There are also a couple like You Still Believe in Me and I Just Wasn't Made for these times that kind of match Morrissey for their levels of kind of angst and self-pity. So yeah, the overall vibe lyrically I'm getting is kind of emo matched with cringy nice guy. Creepy. Or it could be, and this is almost certainly the case, that I've just become too old or too jaded for these to resonate with me like they might have when I was younger, when, all of my emotions were a lot closer to the surface and I felt a lot more urgency when it came to, relationships and love and the opposite sex or, whoever it was I might have been attracted to. That's entirely possible. In fact, likely. So yeah, in conclusion, when I hear Pet Sounds, I hear interesting orchestration. I hear interesting songwriting. You can definitely draw comparisons to the Beatles and Rubber Soul, at least in this one sense. They started out sugary pop songs, but then they made a groundbreaking studio album in which their sound and their songwriting matured immensely. But in the case of the Beach Boys, it seems to me that they lost that thread and they wound up in Kokomo. And perhaps that is the result of Brian Wilson leaving. I could buy that. But even having said all of that, I really can't spend too much time with this album. The alternating levels of emo and creepy nice guy energy that keeps me from really relating to it too strenuously. I certainly appreciate the album a lot more than I thought I might when I started this. I will say with certainty, though, that the problem is me and not the music. My negative reactions to the Pet Sounds are mostly cultural and not musical. I can't promise that I won't slag on the Beach Boys again in the future, but, slightly more educated for it now, and I'm glad for that.